Yesterday, the world came very close to the edge. President Trump threatened that I'm quoting him directly here. A whole civilization will die tonight if Iran didn't reach a deal. And then, just 90 minutes before his own deadline, something shifted. A ceasefire was announced. But here's the thing, this ceasefire is just a pause. The real question is what will happen next? Because Iran put a 10-point peace plan on the table, and the details of that plan tell you everything you need to know about. The US and Israel launched a war on Iran on February 28th of this year. Since then, the conflict has spread across the region. At least 1,497 people have been killed, including 57 health workers, and 1.2 million Lebanese people have been displaced due to Israeli attacks. Iran effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz in retaliation, and that single move triggered a global energy crisis because roughly 20% of the world's oil and gas it passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Trump had been setting deadlines linked to the threats, and this time he escalated further than ever before. He warned that he would destroy Iran's bridges, power plants, and civilian infrastructure. And that's the backdrop against which Iran has put this 10-point plan. So, if we look at the 10-point peace plan, here's my honest answer. The full official text has not been made public. No official version of the proposal has been available, but a summary of released document by Iran's Supreme National Security Council it gives us key demands. Point 1. The Strait of Hormuz. Iran's plan demands that the Strait of Hormuz will be reopened under the coordination of Iran's own armed forces. In other words, Iran is saying they want to control who passes through and on which terms they will allow it. Iran describes this as a regulated passage under the coordination of the armed forces of Iran and says it would confer upon Iran a unique economic and geopolitical standing. Now, that's a massive thing to ask. Point 2 is the end of war with allies. The plan calls for an end to war against all components of Iran's so called axis of resistance, meaning Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in Yemen, and other Iran backed groups as well. Means the US would essentially have to agree to stop targeting Iran's entire proxy network in the Middle East. Point 3. US military withdrawal. Iran plans to call for a withdrawal of US combat forces from all bases and points of deployment within the region. And the US has maintained military bases across the Persian Gulf for decades. Iran did not define what it means by combat forces, which potentially gives some wiggle room, but even a partial withdrawal would alarm the Gulf Arab states that have relied on American military presence for their security for years now. Point 4 and 5, it talks about sanctions, frozen assets. If I put it into simple words, the plan demands the lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions against Iran and the release of frozen Iranian assets. Iran's frozen assets, the amount of tens of billions of dollars. Then the uranium enrichment. That's very crucial. It calls for an acceptance for Iran's uranium enrichment. This is one of particularly significant point. Iran is currently enriching up to 60% purity after the Natanz nuclear facility that was bombed in 2021. So 90% level is required to make an atomic bomb. The US has made eliminating Iran's nuclear program one of its stated war aims. So this is a direct collision course here. Now, next they want war damage compensation. The plan concludes that compensation of Iran war damage will be given, and the Israeli strikes and US attacks, all of this, that's enormous financial obligation. Next, it's a binding UN Security Council resolution. Iran wants that UN Security Council resolution should make any final deal binding under international law. Tehran has learned their lesson after 2015 nuclear deal, which US simply walked away from. So this time they want something positive and actual under international law. Now, how has the US responded? On Monday, Trump called Iran's plan a significant step, but not good enough. Then, hours later, after Pakistan brokered last minute talks, Trump's tone slightly shifted. He said the 10 points proposal constitutes a workable basis to which the negotiations can happen, and almost all of the various points of past contentions have been agreed to between the US and Iran, as he said. But here's the complication. Trump later suggested in a Sky News interview that the 10 points that Iran has formally leaked are different from what is actually being negotiated, and they are not the maximalist demands that Iran is claiming, he said. So, and the US, they also put forward a counter proposal that is a 15-point American plan that is included in 30-day ceasefire. It includes dismantling Iran nuclear facilities, limits on Iran missiles, reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and in return, US would remove all sanctions and provide Iran's Bushehr plant support. And Iran reportedly called this plan extremely maximalist and unreasonable. Crucially, since the ceasefire announcement, neither Trump nor his administration they have made any mention of key sticking points of the Iranian plan, including the sanctions lift, releasing frozen assets, or withdrawing of military forces from the region. So collectively, if we look at this scenario, they are gonna clash on it. 10 points from them, 15 from them, but they don't agree on one thing. Now, where the things are going, that is very crucial. Iran's Supreme National Security Council, they accepted the 2-week ceasefire, calling it a victory while they are also making it clear that war has not ended and our hands remain upon the trigger, the council statement said, as it is coming. Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, he announced the ceasefire. He invited both sides to Islamabad on Friday, April 10th, to further negotiate a conclusive agreement. But there is already cracks in the ceasefire. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu, he said the agreement does not extend to Lebanon, which contradicts to Pakistan's statement because it covered that all hostilities, including Lebanon, will be under ceasefire. And Israeli forces they continued their assault across the southern Lebanon. Sporadic attacks in Iran, other Gulf countries, they continued hours immediately after the ceasefire was announced. So, experts are cautiously walking. Alex Vatanka, director of the Iran program at the Middle East Institute, said there is a potential for agreement, especially on the permanent ceasefire, but significant gaps remain between the two sides. He said, "You have a window here to prevent a disaster, and we are very close to it." The 2 weeks ahead are not a peace, they are a negotiating window. Whether that window leads to a real deal or just another escalation, it depends on what happens in Islamabad on Friday. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the ceasefire will hold or not? Subscribe to this channel.